Test, test. Can you hear me? Okay.
Microphone check, test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The Subcommittee on Defense will come to order. This morning's subcommittee will receive testimony on the defense health programs in the military health system, and we have 6 witnesses with us today, and we welcome them. Lieutenant General R. Scott Dingell, Surgeon of the U.S. Army; Rear Admiral Bruce L. Gellum, Surgeon of the U.S. Navy; Lieutenant General Dorothy A. Hogg, Surgeon General of the United States Air Force; Mr. Cafferty, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs; and Lieutenant Ronald J. Pace, Director of Defense Health Agency; and Mr. Bill Tinson, Program Executive Officer of Defense Healthcare and Management Systems. Today, we have serious questions on how medical reforms have been accounted for in the President's budget for fiscal year 2021. As you will notice, we will have members coming in and out. We are getting briefings on COVID-19 as we speak, and there's a few other meetings going on, but your full testimony is available, and I know members had it like I did last night to read through it. So we'll get started. Across the spectrum of military healthcare system, from military readiness to benefit care, in many cases, the budget justifications lacks adequate detail for the subcommittee to make informed decisions. We hope the witnesses today can address the subcommittee's questions and concerns. Out of particular interest, we look forward to hearing about the role of the department in addressing or assisting other federal agencies dealing with the epidemic or pandemic, possible outbreaks, such as COVID-19. The department's study on reducing and eliminating certain healthcare services at many military treatment facilities, and an update on the department's electronic healthcare record system, MSH Genesis. We look forward to hearing about these topics and more. And with that, I want to once again thank you for appearing before the subcommittee. And now I want to recognize our distinguished ranking member, Mr. Culver, for his comments.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I want to thank you for referring to this horrible disease as COVID-19. I'm from Corona, California, so we want to make sure that we call the disease what it is.
I did it for you.
And I appreciate that very much. I want to welcome our distinguished panel. This is a critical year for the military healthcare system with a lot at stake. We're trying to keep the COVID-19 virus from impacting readiness while also going through significant structural changes to the system. These changes include transitioning military treatment facilities from the services to the Defense Health Agency, consolidating some facilities and shifting medical specialties to focus more on operational readiness, all while continuing to implement a new electronic health record system. Clearly, you have a lot on your plate. Given that these issues will impact a broad population to include military personnel, dependents, and retirees, I can't overstate the importance of keeping us apprised of your progress and informing us when you need help. We must ensure that health and safety are not adversely impacted as a result of these structural changes. During my time, I'll ask you to address some of these issues, starting with your preparedness and resourcing for COVID-19. We all know the impact it has globally, and I'll be interested in your plans to mitigate its effect on the force. In addition, I'll ask about your views on the structural changes to the military healthcare system and their potential impact on readiness. And finally, I look forward to hearing about the progress on implementing the new electronic health record. Thank you for your service. I look forward to your testimony. With that, Madam Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Lowy and Ms. Granger are hoping to be joining us, and we will break for any statements that they wish to make when they arrive. As I said earlier, your full written testimony will be placed in the record, and members have copies at their seats, and I told some of you I was riveted reading last night, so we have it, and we thank you for it. In the interest of time, however, I'm going to strongly encourage each one of you to keep your summarized statement to 3 minutes or less. And I will let you know when you're at 3 minutes. I will do so gently, and then it might get a little louder with the gavel. So, Lieutenant General Dingell, will you lead us off with a 3-minute remark?
Thank you, Vice Chairwoman Mccullen. Ranking Member Calvert and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it is an honor to speak before you today. The mission of Army medicine is to conserve the fighting strength. As the Army is called upon to deploy, fight, and win wars in support of our national defense strategy. We accomplish this not independently, but as part of a synergistic joint force that is represented before you today. The Chief of Staff of the Army says people first and winning matters because there is no second place in combat. Like General McConville, I and everyone in Army medicine recognize the foundational strength of our Army lies in our people, our soldiers, their families, our civilians, and our soldiers for life. They are our greatest strength and our most important asset. My vision for Army medicine is to ensure that we remain ready, reformed, reorganized, responsive, and relevant in this era of unprecedented global complexity, change, and uncertainty, whether in support of multi-domain operations, large-scale combat operations, or pandemic emergencies. As the Army undergoes modernization to support the multi-domain battlefield, we will lead through change and reorganize to remain relevant and responsive to the warfighter. However, our unwavering commitment to save lives on the battlefield will never change. In tomorrow's multi-domain battlefield, our adversaries may possess robust anti-access and area denial capabilities that will test our ability to provide prolonged field care. Consequently, our medics will have to sustain life in austere locations. This requires changes in our doctrine, training, and materiel solutions. To remain relevant in this new environment, Army medicine must leverage 21st century digital technologies along with cutting-edge research and development in order to remain proficient. Army medicine is assisting in the prevention, deterrence, detection, and treatment of infectious diseases. Similar to HIV and the Ebola responses, Army medicine is working with leading agencies and institutions to combat COVID-19. Army medicine's ability to prevent, detect, and treat infectious diseases depends greatly on the Army's research, development, and public health capabilities that enable a medical-ready force and a force that is medically ready. In closing, I want to thank the committee for allowing my colleagues and I to speak before you this morning. America entrusts the military health system, Army medicine, and the services with its most precious resources, our sons and daughters. It is imperative that we get it right, and we will. Your commitment and continued support assures the Joint Force that when a wounded soldier cries out medic in combat, we will be there ready to respond because Army medicine is Army strong. I look forward to answering your questions.
Sir, that was delivered with precision timing. Thank you. Rear Admiral Gillum, your statement, please.
Good morning. Madam Chairwoman Mccullen, Ranking Member Culver, distinguished members of the subcommittee. On behalf of the over 60,000 men and women who comprise the mission-ready Navy medicine team, I'm pleased to be here today. I'm grateful for the continued trust you place in us. Mission of Navy medicine is tightly linked to those we serve, the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps. Their ability to prevail across the range of military operations depends on their medical readiness and our capability to enhance their survival in the high-end fight. At its core, survivability is Navy medicine's contribution to lethality. To this end, our One Navy Medicine priorities of people, platforms, performance, and power are strategically aligned to meet these imperatives. Well-trained people working as cohesive teams on optimized platforms demonstrating high-velocity performance that will project medical power in support of naval superiority. I can tell you that these priorities are rapidly taking hold. On any given day, Navy medicine personnel are deployed and operating forward a full range of diverse missions, including damage control, resuscitation, and surgery teams, trauma care at the NATO Role 3 multinational medical unit in Kandahar Airfield, Afghanistan, humanitarian assistance aboard our hospital ships, and expeditionary health service support and force health protection around the world. There is no doubt that people are the epicenter of everything we do. Dedicated active and reserve personnel, Navy civilians, serving around the world in support of our mission. In order to meet current and future challenges, we must recruit and retain talented medical and civilian workforce. Navy medicine continues to focus on several key areas, both our officer and enlisted communities, including critical wartime and operational specialties, as well as mental health care providers. Importantly, we are now embedding 29% of our uniform mental health providers directly with Fleet Marine Force, and training commands to improve access to care and to help reduce stigma. All of us have a responsibility to do everything possible to reduce the incidence of suicide. It's important, its impact is devastating and affects families, shipmates, and commands. Collectively, substantive military health system reforms directed by Congress, the fiscal years 2017 and 2019 National Defense Authorization Acts, represents an important inflection point for military medicine, catalyzed our efforts to strengthen our integrated system of readiness and health. Navy and Marine Corps leadership recognize the tremendous opportunity we have to refocus our efforts on medical readiness while transitioning healthcare benefit administration to the Defense Health Agency. As you would expect from a transformation of this scale, MHS reform presents us with both challenges and opportunities. We can point to progress made to date. However, all of us recognize there is much work ahead. In summary, the nation depends upon our unique expeditionary medical expertise to prepare and support our naval forces. It is a privilege to care for our sailors, Marines, and families. Again, thank you for your leadership. I look forward to your question.
Thank you. Lieutenant General Hawk, please.
Vice Chairwoman Mccullen, Representative Culver, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it is my distinct honor to testify on behalf of the 64,600 active duty Guard, Reserve, and civilian airmen who comprise the Air Force Medical Service. At home and abroad, Air Force medics answer the call across a broad spectrum of operational, humanitarian, and disaster response missions. From the clinic to the battlefield and even the back of an airplane, our ability to deliver life-sustaining care is the most challenging environments ensures that our warriors return home to their families. The Air Force Medical Services core competency of aerospace medicine and aeromedical evacuation focuses on the needs of air and space operators and maintainers. Since September 11th, Air Force aeromedical evacuation crews have conducted more than 340,000 global patient movements, including 13,500 critical care missions. In the deployed environment, roughly 30% of downrange care is trauma-related, and the remaining 70% is disease non-battle injuries. These injuries range from occupational, dental, and musculoskeletal injuries. Our training and currency opportunities mirror these scenarios to produce well-rounded, flexible medics who can accomplish any mission under the most unpredictable conditions. As the national defense strategy shifts focus to global conflict and peer competition, the Air Force is postured to increase lethality, strengthen alliances, and realign resources. The Air Force Medical Service is evolving in support of these national defense objectives by investing in our aeromedical evacuation platforms, ground surgical teams, and broadening every medic's skill set, preparing them to deliver care in denied environments where we may not have the access to functioning airfields or state-of-the-art equipment. The story of Senior Airman Colleen Mitchell, a young medical technician, drives home the criticality of this last point. In January, Airman Mitchell was on her first deployment when al-Shabaab militants attacked the airfield at Manda Bay, Kenya, killing 3 Americans. Awakened by the chaos, she assumed the role of lead medic, spending hours triaging and treating patients. Working with limited personnel and supplies, she operated well above her pay grade and outside her comfort zone to save lives. Airman Mitchell demonstrates the qualities that makes our medics remarkable: leadership, technical skill, and an unwavering commitment to mission and those whom we serve. As the Surgeon General, my responsibility is to prepare every medic to do what Airman Mitchell did, and I do not take this task lightly. Military treatment facilities remain our primary readiness platform, but sometimes fall short of offering patient volume, diversity, and acuity needed to sustain clinical currency. Leveraging additional training opportunities through civilian and government health organization is paramount and will inevitably grow as we rescope the direct care system. Military medicine presents unique challenges that a civilian healthcare system does not encounter. Our medics will continue to rise to those challenges. Thank you for your continued support, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Lieutenant General Place.
Vice Chairwoman Mccullen, Ranking Member Calvert, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity. I'll add just a few comments to my colleagues. The DHA's principal mission is supporting readiness. Within that mission are 2 distinct responsibilities. First, to ensure that every person in uniform is medically ready to perform their job anywhere in the world. Second is to ensure our military medical personnel have the cognitive and technical skills to support the full range of military operations which our leaders may call on us to perform. The Defense Health Agency is accountable to the Assistant Secretary of Defense, Honorable McCaffrey, the combatant commands, and the military departments for same. The DHA assumed responsibility for managing all military hospitals and clinics in the United States in October of last year. Working closely with my colleagues, the Service Surgeons General and the Joint Staff Surgeon, we continue to view our medical facilities as readiness platforms where medical professionals from the Army, Navy, and Air Force both obtain and sustain their skills, from which these professionals deploy in support of military operations. The DoD's leadership's recent assessment of which medical facilities best support this readiness mission provides the basis for moving forward and implementing these decisions. We intend to execute this plan in a manner that ensures our patients continue to have timely access to quality medical care. I'll highlight a few important points. First, active duty family members who are required to transition to civilian network providers will incur little to no additional out-of-pocket costs for their care. Second, all beneficiaries in these locations will still enjoy access to the Mtf pharmacy. Finally, we'll implement changes in a deliberate fashion at a pace local healthcare markets can handle. If market capacity in a particular location is more constrained than we estimated, we'll reassess our plans and potentially adjust them. The Surgeons General and I are ensuring that the proposed reduction in infrastructure and uniformed medical personnel is coordinated. This synchronization will be reflected in the department's medical personnel reduction plan required by the FY20 NDAA Section 719 that's due to the Congress in June. The DHA is scrutinizing every part of our health budget to ensure we're using the resources provided by Congress in a manner that most effectively supports our readiness mission. We've established 4 healthcare markets to integrate healthcare in specific regions of the country. We'll be establishing additional markets throughout this year. Local military medical leaders will have the authority and responsibility to allocate resources in a way that improves patient care and our readiness functions. I'm grateful for the opportunity to provide further detail on our efforts to standardize military medical support to combatant commands, the military departments, and to our patients. Thank you to the members of this committee for your commitment to the men and women of our armed forces and the families who support them.
Mr. Cafferty, please.
Vice Chairwoman Mccullen, Ranking Member Calvert, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the Secretary of Defense, it is an honor to speak before you today, representing the dedicated military and civilian professionals of the military health system who support our warfighters and care for the 9.6 million beneficiaries that our system serves. I'm pleased to present to you the Defense Health Budget for fiscal year 2021, a budget that prioritizes the medical readiness of our military force and the readiness of our medical force, while sustaining access to quality health care for our beneficiaries. Our proposed FY21 budget requests $33.1 billion for the Defense Health Program. This proposed budget reflects our continued implementation of a number of comprehensive reforms to our health system as directed by Congress and department leadership. Some of the significant reforms are the following: consolidating administration and management of our military hospitals and clinics under the Defense Health Agency, right-sizing our military medical infrastructure to focus on readiness within our direct care system, and finally, optimizing the size and composition of the military medical force to best meet our readiness mission. In implementing these reforms, the department is guided by 2 critical principles. First, that our military hospitals and clinics are first and foremost military facilities whose operations need to be focused on meeting military readiness requirements. That means that our MTFs serve as the primary platform by which we ensure service members are medically ready to train and deploy. It also means that our MTFs are effectively utilized as training platforms that enable our military medical personnel to acquire and maintain the clinical skills that prepare them for deployment and support of combat operations. Second, that as we reform the military health system, we continue to make good on our commitment to provide our beneficiaries with access to quality health care. While we implement these changes to the health system, we also continue to pursue our other priority initiatives that have contributed to the achievement of the highest battlefield survival rates in history while providing world-class health care to our millions of beneficiaries. That includes our continued deployment of our electronic health record and our ongoing operation of our cutting-edge research and development programs, which Congress and this committee have long championed. That work in that area is playing a significant role in support of the whole-of-government effort on the COVID-19 issue. I want to thank the committee for your continued support of these efforts and to the men and women of the military health system and the millions depending on us. Your support has helped us achieve and continue to drive forward unparalleled success in building and sustaining a military health system that delivers for our service members, our beneficiaries, and our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tiston.
Vice Chairwoman Mccullen, Ranking Member Calvert, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for your invitation. I represent the Program Executive Office Defense Healthcare Management Systems, also known as the PEO DHMS. It's my honor to represent this team of professionals in their efforts to achieve a single common electronic health record for our service members, veterans, and their families. Patient-centered care is not only an ethos we use to describe our mission, it's fundamental to our design. From capturing critical data on the battlefield to documenting care at military and veteran medical facilities, we understand the patient is our focus. Our patient-centered model highlights the broad spectrum of people who depend on MHS Genesis. Systems do not create success, people do. Our progress depends on the hard work and talent of clinicians, engineers, and other business professionals who comprise our MHS Genesis team. I want to thank our functional champion, Major General Payne, and my VA counterpart, Mr. John Wyndham, for their partnership as we deliver a single common record. In September 2019, we completed Wave Travis at 4 installations across California and Idaho without any patient safety issues. The medical staff at Travis Air Force Base demonstrated confidence in MHS Genesis. On day 1, when a patient arrived at the emergency room in sudden cardiac arrest 2 hours before the official go-live, the team had a choice. They chose MHS Genesis, and that was the right decision. With every deployment, we hone our process and improve capability delivery. For instance, establishing peer-to-peer training proved very successful. So successful, in fact, that Major General Payne initiated a commander's workshop to strengthen commanders' engagement as we move forward with deployments. This summer, MHS Genesis will deploy to Wave Nellis, more than doubling the number of deployed sites. As we move forward, we seek to industrialize our process while meeting the unique needs of each site in order to optimize delivery to the enterprise. We've proven that MHS Genesis significantly improves the patient experience. Anytime we can enhance patient care, we absolutely should. As part of that process, we will continue to assess risks and ensure fiscal stewardship, making every dollar count. Critical to making every dollar count is optimizing decisions with the VA to increase efficiencies. For example, within the next few months, we will launch a joint health information exchange with the VA, expanding DoD connections with private sector healthcare providers. In closing, as the son and brother of veterans, I'm truly invested in the success of this program. Spending significant time at Walter Reed with my parents, I understand the criticality of delivering patient-centered care. I'm confident we have the right people in the right place to complete this mission. We value transparency and we value you, the committee. As the wise sentiment goes, it's amazing what can be achieved as long as we don't care who gets the credit. The MHS Genesis team exemplifies this wisdom. Together, we have the opportunity to make a tangible difference in the lives of millions of Americans. Thank you again for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And with great humility and honor, I turn to the full chair of the Appropriations Committee, Ms. Lowy, for her first questions.
Thank you. Oh, boy. Thank you. I need some health care, I think, at this moment. But it was all checked out. I just lost my voice. But I wanted to come to this hearing because, as you probably know, this committee and the other committee focusing on veterans has been waiting with bated breath to get a health care record system that works. As you probably know, Mr. Tinston, for decades, this committee has funded efforts to modernize the health system at both the VA and the Department of Defense. In particular, efforts to address electronic health records. Now, I understand, because I've had briefings, hearings on this for the last 5 years at least, so I know it's difficult. But frankly, our service members and their families have been waiting for far too long, and the taxpayers have invested too much to continue with problems and delays. I'm not saying that it's all VA and that DOD is perfect, but are you learning anything by this? We had a hearing not too long ago with the VA, and the last number I looked at is the department is requesting another billion, in case anyone in the audience think I said million, another billion in FY21. I don't get it. Maybe you can explain why this has taken so long. If this happened in the private sector, they'd probably be out of business, but you are too valuable, and no way can you be out of business. But I don't understand why you can't get this done. My colleague, Mr. Rogers, is not here. We've had closed-door hearings, open hearings, private discussions, another $1 billion. Why can't you get this right?
Ma'am, in September, we deployed, the DoD deployed to Wave Travis, which doubled our installed base. It was a very successful deployment. We changed the way we delivered the infrastructure. We changed the way we delivered the training. We prepared people to be effective at doing their jobs, and we found it to be a very effective deployment. At this point, we have 66 sites underway, with Wave Nellis coming up next with 10 sites. So I think we are making tremendous progress in getting MHS Genesis, the modern electronic health record, deployed to the military health system. We also work very, very closely with the VA program because we're really deploying a joint system here. It's a single record for both departments. And so as the VA starts to bring their sites on, we will have one instance of the record about the patient, not where the care was delivered or who delivered the care, available to any provider about the patient when it's necessary.
Can you give me a better explanation as to why you're still bringing on sites? Why is this so complicated?
So when you...
The VA, if the VA isn't up to standards and they can't get records from a disastrous incident that may have happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they're not getting adequate health care.
So when you're delivering an enterprise system, like an enterprise health record, electronic health record that MHS Genesis is, the IT element of it is a small piece of the transformation that has to happen in the organization. It's an organizational transformation. It's a training challenge. So you have to work, so you deliver the right capability in the record, which we've done. You then have to customize that record to meet the physical plant of the facilities that you're supporting. Then you have to train people to be effective clinically with the new workflows that you've introduced. So it's not just to turn it on and let everyone start using it. You have to be very deliberate about bringing people up to speed so that they can be effective, so that we don't compromise the healthcare delivery as we deploy MHS Genesis.
$4.6 billion. Now you want another $1 billion. I am sure that our great military has had many, many complicated missions, and frankly, I don't understand. I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand why you can't get it right. I just hope that next year you won't ask for another $1 billion again and another $1 billion. With $4.6 billion and the expertise that you have in the military, it would seem to me that this task could have been completed, but I've been hearing one excuse after another, year after year, and if my colleague, Mr. Rogers, was here, he'd probably get even redder face than I am, because we've had public meetings, private meetings, one-to-one meetings, two-to-one meetings. Okay, I guess we're going to have to give you another $1 billion. I could think of a lot of other things, so I sure hope you get it right this time. Can you guarantee that this is going to do it? You have finally the expertise to do it?
Congresswoman, we have the right people in the right place to be effective at delivering.
I've heard this for the last 5 years, you know.
Yes.
These people are more expert. They really understand the systems.
Yes.
Okay, mark that down in the record. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
So noted. I recognize Mr. Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you again for your all being here. I'd like to start off with a question on COVID-19, since we're all aware of the significant impact it's having around the world. I was speaking to General Townsend, the AFRICOM commander, earlier this week, and he noted that a map showed the U.S. Army Africa headquarters, the part they have over in Vicenza, Italy, is surrounded by new cases of the virus in the local community. He indicated that, fortunately, so far, they have not, unless there's anything new this morning, they have not been affected, and that's a testament to the great work that people have done in their preparedness to protect our force. As this virus continues to spread, what steps are you taking to ensure installations, both overseas and in the United States, are protected, and do you need additional resources beyond the fiscal year 2021 President's budget request? Or in the supplemental, there may be some assistance may be available to the military also, but to continue to safeguard for the force against COVID-19. So I don't know where to start, so able to start with the Admiral. I'd start down here at the end.
I'd be happy to kick it off, and my colleagues can chime in, Mr. Calvert. So when the DoD looks at the COVID-19 issue, there's really a handful of priorities we look at. First is it's the safety and health and well-being of our service members. That's very much tied to then our ability to, as we deal with this issue, to continue to meet mission. And third, how we, the DoD, can support the rest of the federal government in the all-of-government approach and strategy on the COVID-19 issue. With regard to the guidance we are giving on that first priority around the health and well-being of our service members, the Department has issued a series of force health protection guidance to our service members and our commanders, built largely around CDC guidance. And so things around identifying best science and CDC guidance on risk to personnel, healthcare worker protection, protocols for screening of patients and reporting any detected virus. It's also around giving guidance onto self-protection, common hygiene in terms of protection against viruses. And we also are giving guidance with regard to working with the CDC and the Department of State travel guidance in terms of restriction of travel to and from select countries. And then most recently, sir, giving guidance to installation commanders, the combatant commanders with regard to how to assess their particular situation on the ground, be it at installations here or overseas, and what kind of guidance they should use in making their flexible judgments about protections to put in place on their bases. Again, everything from restricted travel and access to their bases. As the CDC issues additional guidance or things change in terms of travel advisories, we will continue to update that guidance for the field.
Thank you for that. Any other comments on the force itself? I was curious, since yesterday, has there been any other transmissions?
Not that I'm aware of, sir, but for many years, we have had disease containment plans and pandemic influenza plans that we have exercised at different points in time, and so now we're using those plans to help guide and direct our actions in relationship to the CDC and Health and Human Services guidance.
Okay. General?
And sir, from the Army perspective, we've taken a three-prong approach of prevent, detect, and treat. The prevention is the education awareness of all the soldiers and family members within that installation commander or senior commander's footprint. The detection piece are the screenings that we're doing, as well as the testing to verify the presence, to acknowledge if it is in fact symptomatic and those have been identified that that disease is
South
present.
Korea specifically,
yes, sir.
You still have not had any additional transmissions you're aware of?
No additional. Right now we have one soldier and we have 2 dependents right now in the treatment mode. And then that is the last phase, is the treatment, where we have implemented our pandemic expansion plans or response plans in every installation, emergency preparedness, and we're even going as far as worst-case scenarios on bed expansion plans. So we're taking a holistic approach of prevent, detect, and treat as an Army.
In South Korea specifically, is that General Abrams pretty much has all the facilities shut down at this point?
Yes, sir. The prevention piece to ensure that we are not spreading, and they have not implemented some of the normal activities that bring together large gatherings. So whether if it's school, each installation commander makes that call under the guidance of General Abrams. Yes, sir.
Admiral, anything to add?
Yes, sir. I would just say that I would like to thank the committee for the investment that has been made over the years in the President's budget for our network, worldwide network, tri-service network of research labs. I can specifically say for Navy, our research labs that are in Namru 2 in Singapore, as well as Namru in Sigonetta, Italy, are at the forefront of the global response to this emerging pandemic. But that investment has in our scientists and really world-leading knowledge and research is now bearing fruit, and you're seeing that dividend in the sense that we now have 12 of 14 DoD labs actively able to do diagnostic testing around the world.
Thank you.
And Congressman, just DoD-wide, so we have, as of last night, 4 confirmed cases and 12 suspected that are being tested.
And where are those cases at?
That I don't have that breakdown, so this is across the DoD, both here and
Both CONUS and outside of the United States? Is there any cases within the United States you're aware of?
I do not believe DoD cases as of yet, but I can get you the updated numbers today and break it down.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to submit to a report to the committee as soon as possible on the 2 following questions, following up on my colleague from California on COVID-19. $3 billion of the supplemental go towards research and development of vaccines. Considering the department's experience in working with SARS and MERS over the past 20 years, 2 respiratory illnesses that are similar to COVID-19, I'd like to know what the Department of Defense and the Army in particular are doing to work with our other federal agencies and partners, the FDA, CDC, and HHS, in developing a vaccine. The other information I would like you to share back with us as soon as possible. For example, the federal government maintains stockpiles of respirators, and it's come to all of our attention that a number of these respirators have been allowed to expire. Once again, the military usually does logistics and stockpiling with great precision. So we would like information on the department and how you've been maintaining your own stockpile of respirators and masks, and how you would distribute them within the different branches of service if needed. And with also, again, with your knowledge in this area, what role should the DoD play or could play in working with our public agencies to maintain proper stockpiles of critical medical supplies so our country can be better prepared for future healthcare crisis? If you would please follow up and get that information to us. My question is on military downsizing. Secretary McCafferty, as you know, the department provided Congress with a report on February 19th for planned closing and downsizing of up to 50 DoD military treatment facilities. And I would stress the word report here because most of it is just a list of impacted facilities. Some of the comments on the downsizing were there would be no out-of-pocket costs to families or soldiers or airmen, and that their prescriptions wouldn't change. But there are other things that can impact the delivery of health care, not only to the person wearing the uniform, but the family that's behind that person. And our uniform members need to know their families are well taken care of. So bottom line is we still don't have a timeline, projections of cost savings, a real plan for implementation of these downsizing and closures. Now, while I understand the department wants to focus on increased medical readiness of our troops and medical forces, the impacts of this organization will be significant. And trust me, we will hear from the individuals that are impacted by these changes. Some numbers I have seen indicate up to 200,000 family members and retirees across the country would be pushed away from DoD medical treatment facilities and onto civilian providers. We need to understand what that plan looks like. So, Mr. Secretary, your office has clearly been thinking about this for a long time, since you do have a list of facilities that have been impacted. So there must be a document somewhere to back up these facilities and how they were chosen. So, Mr. Secretary, how can you expect us to do due diligence with our appropriate necessary funds to reorganize the military's treatment facilities when we haven't seen a comprehensive, transparent plan from the department on what, when or how this restructuring will be implemented. Additionally, the report submitted on February 19th states, and I quote, "Upon submission of this report, detailed implementation planning will begin, with implementation beginning not less than 90 days later." We need the information. That language, to me and to many, sounds as though the department believes it does not require congressional approval prior to moving forward with the implementation. Secretary McCafferty, does the Congress need to stamp its approval on the recommendation prior to the departments moving forward with the implementation plans to descope services at military treatment facilities? And the final question for now, as we wait your written response as soon as possible, if you are not ready to transmit to us a comprehensive and transparent plan, why not just ask for a delay of the reorganization so we can get it right and not cause any confusion for Congress in appropriating its funds when your patients, our soldiers, airmen, and Marines ask us what is happening to them and their families? Mr. McCafferty.
Yes. So I will try to go through each of the questions, and if I've missed something, let me know, and we will follow up. With regard to the review that the department has done, this was coming out of Ndaa 17, direction from Congress to assess all of our military hospitals and clinics to ensure we were aligned and matched with their primary mission, being military facilities and being training platforms for our medical force, as well as ensuring that our active duty are getting convenient access to care in order to be medically ready to do their jobs. So that's the focus. The reason why in our report to Congress we identify some facilities that we are recommending for a reduction of services available to an MTF, it is because of this attempt to tie the operation of the MTF to that readiness mission. What do I mean by that? There are some facilities where the volume of caseload and the type of patient caseload that is provided at that particular MTF is not a good match for the type of caseload and acuity that our uniform military providers need to maintain proficiency in those skills that we expect them to have currency in.
Mr. McCafferty, we have limited time. When can we expect the follow-up? You seem to have made, I believe that you did due diligence in making your decisions, but we were given none of the supporting documents to follow up with them. We're being asked to make decisions in a time frame within a matter of months. And as you said, Congress charged you with this. So when can we expect a follow-up in the supporting documents?
I will outline that. So the report to Congress identified and shared that we did a screening of 348 U.S.-based hospitals and clinics. Out of those, the department determined 77 needed a deep dive examination. The report went through the methodology we used to identify those, the methodology that was used in looking at the community availability of community care, health care. We then, out of the 77, we actually determined 21.
Sir, we have the report, as you pointed out.
Yes. And
when's the implementation plan coming?
well, in including in the report, there is for each of the 50 facilities that are being recommended for a change, there's an entire use case that goes through all of the data that we use specific to that MTF. The report very clearly says there's not going to be any immediate change to operations, that it's not a one-size-fits-all implementation timeline. It will be based upon our work with the individual MTF in that community.
Mr. McCafferty, our staff seems to think, and I would agree with, based on what I and others have seen, that we need some more information here. So I will ask you to please follow up with the committee because I have a lot of members here who have a lot of other questions that I know you're going to want to hear about, what's on the mind of other members of Congress. So I thank you for that. But at this point in time, I would say that the Appropriations Committee doesn't feel that it's fully informed and ready to go. So
we'll be happy to provide you additional information.
Thank you. With that, I lost my, Mr. Carter, thank you.
Thank you. I've got a voice problem too. Appreciate all of you being here. I'm trying to learn all this stuff. This gets pretty dang complicated. Lieutenant General Place, how's the transition of military treatment facilities to the DHA going? What are some of the successes you've seen? And what are the biggest challenges you're facing? And while these treatment facilities transitioned to DHS this past October, the services are still supporting DHA to keep the train on the tracks. Surgeon General describes the support that you continue to provide to the military treatment facilities in DHA. Lieutenant General Place, what is the plan to decrease reliance on support from the services? Forgive my voice.
Sir, thanks for that question. So in terms of the first part, how's it going? I'd say that I'll agree with you. It's an extraordinarily complex and challenging transformation. That said, overall, I think we are going very smoothly according to the plan. Not that everything is perfect, not that there haven't been challenges associated with it, but in general, as we measure the effectiveness of the care that we're delivering and measure the effectiveness of our actions to plan, we're actually making good improvements in the quality of the care, in the speed with which we're delivering the care, and the use of the resources that the Congress has been generous enough to provide. In terms of the successes, the success we're finding actually is in a particular regional market, and I'll use here in DC, for example, our ability to utilize all the resources of each of the facilities, to include the staff, to align them more appropriately to the location where they can best provide health care. Similarly, we're able to use the particular location, whether you're enrolled to this particular military medical treatment facility or another, to move patients around to achieve the best quality of care. So the standardization within a market has been a success. In terms of the challenge, you're exactly right, and that is the reliance on the service medical departments continue to provide direct support. The reason for that is the staffs that have been doing it for decades in the services are slowly but surely transferring into both our headquarters and into our regional markets. As we're doing that, we're sharing responsibility for the delivery of healthcare and sharing responsibility for oversight of that staff. That plan should continue for approximately another 6 months or so. My anticipation at the end of the summer, the majority of the staff who will need to be transferred will be transferred into the Defense Health Agency headquarters, and the reliance on the service medical departments, at least for U.S.-based support, will be significantly diminished in almost every area. There's some challenges that are still there for the way we do our financing, for example, because we use different financing systems in each of the different services. So we still have to collaborate on some functions, but the majority of them will have transferred. I think I got all your questions, sir. If I didn't, please remind me.
Any of the other services have any comments?
Yes, sir. I would echo, this is a very complicated merger of four cultures, if you will, and we'll get there as long as we get there using manageable risk. What that means for me is we need to transition before we transform. So we need to be able to continue supporting the Defense Health Agency and standing up its capabilities to manage these military treatment facilities, because if you remember in the past, DHA didn't come out of that. They came out of the old TRICARE management activity, and their core competency was writing and managing contracts, not managing MTFs. So we need to help them do this mission. And so I would ask that we not add additional system changes until the Defense Health Agency is standing on their own, is well established, and has been managing the market with demonstrated success for a period of time.
And Mr. Carter, I would add the complexity, as you mentioned, is extremely difficult. And from the Army perspective, you know, what we have always championed is that we cannot fail at this. We have to get this right. And in order to get it right, the focus should be on the Mtf Transitions, which starts with the stand-up of that headquarters. The headquarters is not up and operational and running, then it will continue to require that direct support. After you get that headquarters stood up, then you can start transition the military medical treatment facilities. And then we should also be focusing in that transition on that electronic health record. From the Army perspective, we believe that is the most key thing, and anything else are just distractors that are not allowing us to get it right.
Is there anything in the Department of Defense that's not complex? And the question, I guess, the real question we ought to be asking, maybe we need to talk to the NCOs so they can come before. How are the patients feeling about the care? Are they feeling anything that's throwing them off balance, or they're not getting treated well? Because that's who I'm going to hear from before is the ordinary soldier. He's going to be telling me if he's not getting what he needs.
So that's a great point. We continue to track the patient satisfaction at every location that has already transitioned into the Defense Health Agency. And the patient satisfaction scores at each of those installations are at or above, at every single location that's transitioned, is at or above what they were at baseline before transition. So not perfect, not trying to tell you that it is, but improving.
Sir, I would just add that we remain committed in Navy medicine to creating a truly integrated system of readiness and health. Going through this transition has forced us to look very carefully at our medical readiness requirements. And I will tell you that as we have done that, we have identified opportunities for focus. I mentioned in my opening remarks, we now have almost one-third of our mental health professionals embedded in the fleet and Fleet Marine Force. So we believe that we are seeing, as citing a success, we are seeing increased focus on the wellness and readiness of our warfighters.
Well, and not to take too much more time, but this morning I was thinking about the Navy because a cruise ship is coming back into the United States waters because of once again, the virus. And I thought, my gosh, what happens if we get that on an aircraft carrier or a submarine, and the complications that's going to make for our naval forces?
Yes, sir, I appreciate that concern, and that's something that we've thought very carefully about. And as Mr. McCaffrey said, we have worked closely with the CDC, World Health Organization, NORTHCOM, and other joint staff to understand how to eliminate that risk. And so that is why one of the requirements is that we've established in the fleet is that no ship having left port will go to another port or arrive in another port and disembark for more within 14 days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Judge Carter. Mr. Quare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your work. I want to direct my question on the coronavirus and the use of bases. As you know, the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Esper, approved a request for assistance from the Department of Health and Human Services for housing support for those that had to be quarantined. One of those places is in my area in San Antonio, Lackland Air Force Base. As you know, there was a particular situation that they released an individual. And I know that y'all are providing support services, but just want to know if y'all are coordinating. They released somebody that was still pending a test. That person went to North Star Mall, went around San Antonio. Of course, that caused a problem because the second test came back. There was a protocol modification that the CDC director sent off. Are you all familiar with this letter that got sent off on the modification of protocols? Anybody?
I'm not sure which communication you're referring to, but...
Yeah, it's just basically the modification on CDC changes. That is, there were two changes. One, that is if you have a quarantined individual, that person will only be released if that person has had 2 sequential negative tests within 24 hours. Modification number 1. Modification number 2, which is the most important one, where I think they messed up, was that no person will be released if there's a pending test result. And that's what we saw in the San Antonio area. My request is that I know that you all are providing support services, but I think this modifications should be something that we should apply, whether it's in South Korea or wherever the case might be. I would ask you, if you are not familiar with this, I would ask you to please be familiar with this. Any thoughts or comments on this? And then I want to ask you a second question.
Sure, we will make sure that we have the same guidance. I believe we do have what you're showing us. And as you pointed out, this is a good example of where the department is in a supporting role to the all of government effort. And so the use of military installations in terms of receiving repatriated citizens, the role there was we made available our installations, and then Health and Human Services and the CDC were really, once those folks were on the ground, had that responsibility in terms of managing them, providing them care, doing the testing, and then any kind of referrals out into the private health care sector. And so we defer to them on making and managing that area, but we will take a look at.
Yeah, and that I understand, but even if you're providing support services, if you're off abroad somewhere, let's say South Korea, then we better be familiar with this protocol. So I would ask you to do that. Second thing is, what I would ask you is the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research is working on a vaccine against the coronavirus. Can you give us the status on that progress? And number one, and also I think they're working on a diagnostic testing kits, and how close are we on those 2 points?
Yes. So the military health system is part of the broader interagency on looking at everything from diagnostics, vaccine research, as well as antiviral therapies for if you have the condition, how it can be treated. And so, in fact, we, CDC, NIH are all have research going on a vaccine, and it has been ongoing. I believe clinical trials for that will not be for another few months. And so in terms of a final determined FDA-approved vaccine, likely we're looking at 16, 18, or to 24 months. That's from the research we're doing. I can't speak to similar research NIH or CDC are doing on that. Similarly, on an antiviral therapy, we may be closer there in terms of having something that can be usable. It's actually in clinical trials right now for testing of efficacy.
Well, as I close, I just ask you all to, I know we're putting a lot of federal dollars in research, and I understand that in different areas. I just want to make sure that we're coordinating, working together as we use this large amount of federal dollars. And as you saw, the House passed the supplemental bill yesterday, appropriation. So I just want to make sure we're all coordinated. Thank you for your service, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Womack.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the entire panel. I want to direct my question to General Dingell and Admiral Gillingham, and I'm going to pivot away from all these flavors of the month, COVID-19, et cetera, and I want to come back to tactical medicine for just a minute. It is my strong belief that in the last 2 decades, thanks to the efforts of in the entire readiness scenario to better prepare our men and women in uniform to perform battlefield medicine has saved a lot of lives. There are a lot of people that have been able to go home to their families, albeit maybe banged up a lot, that in many previous wars would have died on the battlefield. And in my regiment, back many years ago, we had a robust combat lifesaver program, and I think that combat lifesaver program was probably the reason why we've done so well. I know that the military, the services are transitioning from the traditional combat lifesaver program to a more robust tactical combat casualty program. So I'd like an update. It is my understanding that that process is still evolving. and that the Tier 2 TC3 program is going to become that bedrock training for our readiness posture, that in the event that we were to engage in a near-peer combat scenario, more force-on-force scenario, that a much more robust combat medic program would be important. So can you explain to me where we are in this process, how it is going, and what you see unfolding in the next year or two?
Mr. Womack, first and foremost, let me thank you for recognizing the first responders. Oftentimes, the combat medic and that combat lifesaver do not get the recognition that they deserve when they are the very first responders that stop the bleeding, that are enablers to the sustainment of life in combat. With that said, you are absolutely correct. Our program is going tremendously within the Army. We call it the the Army Medicine Medical Skills Sustainment Program, which involves everything from expeditionary combat medic care, where we're teaching them expeditionary medicine and how to provide prolonged care in austere environments, all the way to where we're taking our trauma teams, as you mentioned, and embedding them in our civilian facilities, those trauma centers, so that they can get the touches, not just as a trauma surgeon, but as a trauma team. Right now, as we expand that, we currently have 3 programs going on right now across the country. We're going to expand that this year in FY20 for those trauma teams to 3 more, and then we have about another 8 more that are right behind those. In reference to those enlisted training also, we have what we called our strategic medical asset readiness training. And so that SMART focuses once again on that combat medic, not just training them in simple training environments, but also pulling them out and putting them into some of those trauma centers too, so they can get those individual critical task lists trained to proficiency, so when they are called upon, they'll be ready to respond. Bruce.
Thank you, Congressman Womack. As an orthopedic surgeon who served as the officer in charge of a surgical shock trauma platoon in Fallujah in 2004, I can tell you this is of particular interest to me, that we continue to get this right, particularly as the nature of our adversary potentially changes. I will tell you that in addition to moving up in terms of the capability for our enlisted providers for TCCC, we're actually in the process of training the entirety of the ship to have those basic skills. Because as terrific as our independent duty corpsmen are, who are responsible for the medical care on our smaller ships, they would be rapidly overwhelmed. So we are in the process of training the entire crew in fundamentals of tactical casualty care, sir.
I have one follow-up question regarding new medicine, and that is there's a lot of technology out there regarding clotting material in the application of certain bandages and this sort of thing. Are we okay with our stockpiles? Are we procuring these new technological advances in a timely way so that we can use the very best that we have? Because in that golden hour or in those first few minutes, those types of that type of equipment is going to be critical to helping save lives when otherwise they would be lost immediately.
Yes, sir. I can't speak directly to the supply that we have, but I will tell you that there, and perhaps General Place or Mr. McCaffrey can speak in greater detail, but I can tell you there is a tremendous commitment in our research enterprise to make sure that we have absolutely the best possible equipment and technology in the hands of our first providers.
Yes, sir, I'll add on to that, both in terms of quality and in terms of the quantity. The research that has been occurring within the military health system, specifically for intra-abdominal clotting, for example, which is a problem on the battlefield, or injunctional hemorrhage cases, so where extremities come into the thorax or into the abdomen, those are also important. We have cutting-edge research that has given us new clotting technologies to be able to use in those conditions. So it's not just the quantity of them. Yes, sir, we have good stocks of them, but it's also new qualities of hemorrhage control capacities that we have.
Thank you for the service, for all of your service, and I appreciate the answers to my questions here this morning. I'll yield back.
Thank you. I saw some of the clotting techniques that they were working out at Fort Detrick just recently. Truly amazing, and will later on have application in the civilian healthcare world as well. Ms. Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the panel. Excuse me for being here. Prior to coming to Congress, I was a hospital attorney. I represented a regional hospital that had a number of smaller clinics within it, and spent a great deal of my time on medical records completion. It's not easy, it's very complicated. And one of the things that I discovered was that there was a real reluctance by some members of the medical staff to use electronic medical records. So they were used to dictating their charts as they made their rounds, and then that chart would go to medical records, and then somebody would transcribe that chart in medical records so that it could be electronic. It was very cumbersome, took weeks and weeks and weeks to complete. So I want to know a couple of things. The other thing we found is that it's really difficult to attract young people to residencies in the VA. And so I'd like you to address what you're doing to recruit and attract young people into the healthcare system and the delivery system, and then what's been done to improve the use of electronic records, let alone interoperability. I mean, we can't even get to that until we actually have the electronic records in the system. So that's an open question to anyone on the panel who feels like they can address that. Thank you.
Let me start with the kind of the larger question you asked, and probably would defer to the military departments in terms of the specific question of things that we're doing to recruit and retain young people into, I mean, from our perspective, into the medical side of the military. But you indicated the challenge of adopting an electronic health record. And I think that's something that really to foot stomp here for everybody. My experience in the private sector is, even systems like Kaiser that have been around, very sophisticated. When they adopted a new electronic health record, it took several years for them to do, for just many of the reasons you pointed out. It's not so much the technology; it is how do you train your workforce, including clinicians, on that new technology. What are the workflows you need to use to match it up? And it's change management. And I think, and I'll let Mr. Tinston weigh in with some more detail, but we purposely, when we rolled out for the Department of Defense, rolled out the EHR, we did it in a test way in 4 facilities to see what we needed to learn and informed the larger deployment. And we learned many of those things, and I think that is what has led to the most recent deployment in September went far better. And we believe we're really well positioned now as we pursue additional waves of getting it out throughout the system. But I don't know if you have anything to add, Mr. Tinston, on that.
So, Mr. McCaffrey, Congresswoman, we did learn a lot. We did the initial Pacific Northwest sites. We didn't have all of the capabilities that we needed.
Sir, if you would speak into a microphone so that it can be picked up. Not a problem.
We took some time to make sure we had the capabilities right with the record and the workflows, and then we began training those workflows to get people job ready, vice teaching them how to use the IT, which is one of the mistakes we made out the gate. And so we've had much better results with Wave Travis, and we anticipate continuous improvements as we proceed to Wave Nellis and future waves. And as I said earlier, we have 66 sites in the deployment process at this moment.
Are you working with medical schools to train young doctors before they get to residency how to use that IT software?
Well, ma'am, most of the medical students who are on the scholarship programs that end up bringing them into our system, they do rotations in our organizations already. So yes, they are being trained on our systems before they ever get into it. Let me add one other comment to it. We've been using an electronic health record within the military health system for 2 decades. So the challenge that you're describing is really not a challenge that we're having. We're used to using electronic health record. The downside of it, it was homegrown, it was clunky, there were challenges with it. But our culture has changed to accepting the electronic health record. The challenges that we're having now is from our homegrown electronic health record, where we did our own workflows, even locally sometimes differently, to the commercial off-the-shelf that we purchased, transitioning to that. It's not the reliance on the electronic health record that we're having a challenge with.
Are you using software you just purchased off the shelf?
Yes, ma'am. It's a commercial off-the-shelf software program.
All right. The other challenge we ran into was maintaining confidentiality. So when records are being transferred around to different institutions, how do you maintain the confidentiality of the medical record?
So we're fortunate in that we're part of the Department of Defense, and so from a cybersecurity and a data protection perspective, we have the baseline of the department's cyber rules and standards to base our implementation off of. So we manage the cyber protection with the VA because it's a joint record that we're creating between the DoD and the VA to meet the DoD standards. And as far as the interoperability and the exchange of data with external providers, we do that through there's data use agreements in place, and we do that through HL7 standards, and we're engaged with standards agency organizations to make sure that we have influence on how those are promulgated.
Well, it is a tremendous problem, and I appreciate your attention to it. Anything that I can do to help solve that problem, I've been working on it for decades, so feel free to call on me. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Rusberger.
Panel, thank you for being here. What you do is very important. We appreciate your competence. And I want to get into the Strategic Medical Asset Readiness Program, SMART. I know Congressman Womack dealt with it. Lieutenant Dingell, we must ensure that we continue to take care of our American soldiers. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege to accompany your Deputy Chief of Staff, General Crossland, to the Baltimore Shock Trauma at the University of Maryland. And that is rated one of the top trauma centers in the world, research, development, and we have the Air Force has been there for many years and have a really good relationship. And we're focused right now on the Army, maybe the Navy and Marines later. In fact, that trauma center saved my life 50 years ago. And if it weren't for their expertise and competence, I wouldn't be here today. Maybe that's a good thing for some people. During our visit, we discussed the SMART program, which provides combat medics the opportunity to get hands-on training alongside their civilian counterparts. The studies show that during the first few years of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, we could have saved 1 in 7 troops lost if they had access to reliable trauma care. Now, what are your plans to expand this vital program? Does the FY21 budget support this? And as our military shifts to near-peer competition, can you explain why trauma care experience is so important to our medical corps?
Thank you, Representative. As again, you've experienced the great treatment from the Baltimore Shock and Trauma. One of the beauties of the SMART program is it's taking, again, that combat medic and expounding and building upon something that we've had within the Army called medical proficiency training in the old days, where we were leveraging just our military medical treatment facilities. With Baltimore Shock and Trauma and then those hospitals who are those civilian trauma centers, they're exposing these medics in a 2-week rotation with the ability to put hands-on trauma injuries and trauma cases. So that is exponentially increasing their skill set, their individual critical task list, and it is just priceless. We are expanding to 2 programs this fiscal year, this summer, with plans to expand to about 6, 7 more almost each year. And again, we have not had any issues with funding as we continue to expand, and our intent is to expand this across the country.
Okay, that's good. Is that it, Hook?
Yes, sir. So as you know, we've used Baltimore for quite some time. We have other C-STARS capabilities out there with Cincinnati and University of Medical Center in Nevada. What we are also looking at is embedding entire teams in civilian facilities, 24/7, 365 days a year, where they're getting the touches on a regular and consistent basis.
That's good. You keep up. All right, I want to move to the peer review orthopedic research program. Secretary McCaffrey, I'd like to ask you about this program, the orthopedic research program. I've been supporting this program for years. It's a research program which has demonstrated results enrolling more than 15,000 patients to date in military-relevant research with the potential to provide health care solutions for injured service members, veterans, and civilians. Now, the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan have resulted in 5,300 deaths and 52,000 battlefield injuries among American service personnel, including more than 2,200 major limb amputations. The unique nature of these wounds, which primarily result from explosive blasts and high velocity of gunshot, has been well documented. The Orthopedic Research Program has been funded since 2009 and has received level funding at $30 million per year since FY 2012. These funds have allowed our orthopedic docs to work miracles, stabilizing limbs, helping with tissue regeneration, and even the full face transplant. Those conducting the research are asking for an increase to $35 million in order to provide stable funding for the consortiums, which includes the Major Extremity Trauma Research Consortium, metric, and that's anchored at Johns Hopkins University. Can you walk us through the history of the Orthopedic Research Program and the consortium it works? And also, do you believe that the program could benefit from increased funding designated to support the consortiums on an ongoing basis? Do you agree that consortiums are a force multiplier that provide the greatest return on investment?
So thank you for the question, Congressman. To be candid, I cannot walk you through the history of this particular research program. I would need to get back to you in terms of.
Well, I probably can more than you then.
Some of the questions. I'm not aware of the request for increased funding in this particular research program, but I'm happy to take back your questions and provide you the.
Well, I'll get my staff to get in contact with you or your staff today, and I want to try to make this a priority if we can.
Sure.
Okay, yield back.
Maybe we could have the Army follow up on that to the committee. Mr. Christ.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank all of you for being here today. We appreciate your service to our country. As you know, Iran launched 11 ballistic missiles at the Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. While we thought that all service members were safe, over 100 service members have since been diagnosed with traumatic brain injury. What is the status of the service members who were in the attack? And out of those who have returned to duty, how many are on light or restricted service? And that's for any of you who feel comfortable responding.
So, Congressman Christ, this may be a little dated. This is probably numbers from a couple of days ago, but my understanding, out of the roughly 109 service members that were identified, 75 have been reviewed, evaluated, and are actually back in duty in Iraq. The remainder, I would need to go back and check in terms of what is the status with regard to their evaluation, and have they been returned to duty, and what type of duty. I don't have that handy, but I can get back to you on that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that very much. I'm concerned, obviously, because even though the bunkers mostly held, and they had ample warning to take shelter, over 100 service members were diagnosed. And that's very disconcerting, obviously. That number will likely increase, too, I'm told. As General Miley said, the troops in the attack will need to be monitored for the rest of their lives. But he also said, quote, that there's nothing we could have done, end quote, because the missiles were so powerful. If we are making investments to counter Russia and China, we also need to protect our service members against the powerful weapons systems, including the ballistic missiles. What are we doing to protect service members from ballistic missiles or other causes of TBI?
So a couple of things. One of the areas that Congress has asked the department to work on, and we are in process, and that is focused especially on the implications of blast exposure.
Right.
And we are in the middle of doing a study on that to figure out better ways to measure it, but then more importantly, what we find out about the impacts of blast exposure on brain health, that then needs to inform everything from what weapons we acquire, the training we put in place, not just in a deployed setting, but training, here at home, to inform what we can do to best protect our service members. And then most importantly, and I think you kind of referenced it, was what we are doing. I believe it's the Special Forces Command right now is really doing a good job at baselining all of their service members with regard to their cognitive abilities and have that as the benchmark then to evaluate over time to see if any of their, in training and deployments, any potentially concussive events have affected that baseline as a way to monitor and evaluate. So those are some of the things that we are looking at.
Great. We've known that brain injuries are a problem, and that we've known that our adversaries have these weapons. So how have we not considered what would happen in an attack like this?
So I believe we have considered, based upon the evidence we have and what kind of protective gear, based upon research we have done, what we believe makes sense in terms of protection, and most importantly, we do have standard across the board policy with regard to if a service member has experienced a concussive event. There are very strict protocols around reporting that, screening that service member, getting the evaluation, and then pursuing whatever medical care is required before return to duty or something else.
Thank you, sir. We've seen patches of coronavirus here at home, including in my home of Tampa Bay, home to CENTCOM and SOCOM. As you know, there are also larger outbreaks near military installations overseas. What are you doing to stop the spread of the coronavirus in our troops?
So the department has issued a series over the last 4 to 5 weeks, force health protection guidance, largely built around CDC guidance. And part of that, though, is how we apply that guidance to the military environment and guidance we give to installation commanders, both here and abroad, and how they can apply that to their particular situations on the ground to inform what they want to do with their service members in terms of screening, access to the installation as part of the effort to contain any infection at their base or surrounding area.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just finally, do military installations have access to testing? And then I yield back.
The installations, it's tied to where we have the lab technology at military installations in terms of our MTFs. Right now, my last information is I thought we had 9 or 10 of our military labs have the access for the testing that's approved by the CDC. We're seeking to get all of our labs, which is about 14 or 15, to have that ability.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. If you'd follow up with the committee on that, on the testing. Mr. Ryan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here. I want to go in a little bit of a different direction. I am a little bit unique. I think I'm the only one who sits on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee and the Military Construction VA Subcommittee. So the issue of health as it relates to all of you and active duty and as it connects to veterans is important. And one of the things, and I've tried to look through a lot of your testimony, it's very technical. We're talking about records and all of that. I want to talk to you about obesity rates. From what I can gather, the obesity rates for active duty are going up. 15.8% a couple of years back, and now 17.4%. In the Navy, it's 22%. Air Force is 18%. Army is 17%. Males between 35 and 44 years old have almost a 30% obesity rate. And when you look at the increase in blood pressure and diabetes and heart disease, all of the stuff you know way better than I do, this is a problem that we're not even talking about. And it's got a relatively simple or simpler solution than everything we've just talked about. And for the last few years, my staff and I have been trying to dig in on the food that is being fed to our soldiers, the fact that the commissaries and cafeterias are closed and people are working late, and the only thing left on the whole base is a Burger King that's open, and so they go and do that over the course of many years. Now, we need a big strategy to reverse the obesity rates. And I mean, I think most people would be shocked to think that we watch Tom Brady and we see these high-performing athletes and we look at their diets and we look at their lifestyles, and we are spending billions of dollars to have high-performing men and women serving our country, performing at peak levels in very high-pressured situations. And for us to have an obesity rate that's creeping up to 20% and zero strategy on how to fix it, that's a real problem. And then you come back and you want more money for this and more money for that. And there's all kinds of research going on and reversing type 2 diabetes with food as medicine and all kinds of innovative things that are happening in the real world that we have got to make sure that it's getting into the military. Now, here's the connection for us who sit at, 30,000 feet. The diabetes rate for veterans is 1 in 5. The diabetes rate for average Americans, 1 in 10. So here we're blowing all this money. I've been on ships before, and you walk in, and it's all the sugary cereals. Now, look, I'm not a prude on this stuff. I'm an 80%er, right? 80% of the time, you do what's right, you work out, you eat healthy 80% of the time. But we can't have this, folks. This is unacceptable that we're going to continue. Is there any strategy that's in place, Mr. Secretary, that is addressing this in an aggressive way?
So we have, in part, working with your office, I know last year, have been putting together what I would call more of a framework or a skeleton in terms of what would be the key components of a strategy. As you mentioned, part of it in terms of on the health side is, what are the health guidelines and health recommendations that then feed into how our installations are operated and the decisions made about what types of food, access to that, and where we have not completed that is that closure, that link between the medical side and how we are operating our infrastructure, so to speak, in delivery of food. So there is more work to be done on that, and you make very good points in terms of, part of lethality is our service members and their health and their ability to do their job, and this is a negative impact on that.
Well, it's a waste of money, is what it is. I mean, it's inefficient. It's obviously it goes to production, and they go into the VA system, and they have diabetes. And then diabetes, when you look at the diabetes with any other sickness, just jacks up the cost. It extends your stays in the hospital. It complicates any other issue that you may have. If you have to go to surgery or if you've got a heart problem and diabetes, it just makes it that much worse. And so now I'll leave here and I'll go sit in another committee at the VA and talk about how we don't have any money. And so we've got to start seeing these systems as integrated. And it's same, we could have a whole discussion on K through 12 school. When I walk into a school and these kids are getting a Rice Krispie treat and a thing of chocolate milk, and they start their day out with about 80 grams of sugar, and then they're on the Medicaid program, and they end up getting diabetes with the public money that we spent to buy them Rice Krispie treats and chocolate milk, and then the public money we spend to take care of them on a Medicaid. American people are sick of this. This does not make any sense. And I want the military in the United States to be the leader in this. So I only have probably a little bit of time left, and I would just like to give it to the Surgeon Generals if anybody, if one of you have a comment on this.
Sir, I'll be real quick, Mr. Ryan. Yep. Within the Army, we have a very pragmatic approach to the health of the force, and we have many programs from Go Green, Healthy Choices, Spartan, Thor that get after the eating as well as the activity as well as the entire life process or approach to living, and then our holistic health and fitness, going after the spiritual, physical, and mental well-being of our soldiers, the ACFT, APFT, the wellness centers, all designed to, one, educate our soldiers, but we got programs that are also inculcating this into the units, not just special forces, but treating every soldier as an athlete.
No, I'd certainly agree. Very similarly in the Navy, we have a similar program. Certainly we understand the importance of wellness. I think, sir, one of the points you make are the social determinants of health that we really have to get after, and the environments in which our sailors, Marines, and and soldiers live. So we are working with commissaries, for example, with our dietitians to provide guidance so that it's available in the commissary as individuals purchase their groceries. So we agree with you 100%, and we are working very hard to
We
get
got a lot of work to do, and
Yes,
this
sir.
committee is going to push every single
I
one of you
think-
to make this happen.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I think everybody's gotten the message, and I know there's more to say, but we actually are out of time for a vote. And I do want to follow up with one question, not to be responded here today, but reported back to the staff. It goes back to the military health personnel restructuring. The DOD, in your announcement of the plan of healthcare restructuring, roughly 18,000 uniformed health positions will be gone with no plan to replace them, yet you're talking about putting people into the marketplace. We know that there is a shortage in our healthcare system throughout this country. We're also concerned about your ability when these facilities close to be able to retain some of the docs and high specialized individuals that are serving us. You also function as teaching hospitals. And teaching hospitals are closing and limiting the number of training opportunities all across this country. We can't afford to lose you as part of our backbone for our, not only our military health, but for our all over U.S. healthcare system, especially when it comes to OBGYNs and pediatricians. And with more women serving OBGYNs, I have to say, I have some familiarity with them, having had an Army doctor deliver both of my children. And, you know, we can't afford to be losing those kinds of specialties and keep and recruit and retrain women, as well as women who are family members. So we've got some serious questions on that. We want to be helpful with you as you make that decision, but I think we need to look at a whole of healthcare. So I want to thank you so much for coming. And this also goes to Mr. Carter's question about, you know, some of the outside treatment happening as well. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your service, and thank you for getting back to us promptly, because we're starting to mark up the bills. With that, this meeting is adjourned. This hearing is adjourned. Okay.